Okay, lots of news to cover today. Some breaking news today coming out of the White House. President Trump on Wednesday saying that he's designating the left-wing anti-fascist Antifa movement as a terrorist organization. The president taking to social media saying, "I am pleased to inform our many U.S.A. patriots that I am designating Antifa, a sick, dangerous, radical left disaster, as a major terrorist organization. I will also be strongly recommending that those funding Antifa be thoroughly investigated in accordance with the highest legal standards and practices. Thank you for your attention to this matter." Retired Marine Intelligence Officer and host of the Strap podcast, Hal Kempfer, is here. Hal, we don't have specifics at this hour. What questions do you have about the president's announcement?
Well, Austin, really, the question I have is how are they going to designate Antifa as a terrorist organization? One of the things about Antifa is it is, as you said, a movement. It is a bunch of disparate individuals, small groups, if you will, that do actions under the banner of Antifa, which is short for anti-fascist, and they've been around for well over a decade or more. They've been, very active. If you recall what was going on with the federal building up in Portland, Oregon, that was a lot of folks that were there protesting, doing damage to the building, all the stuff going on there, did so under the Antifa banner. So my first question is, how are you going to do that? The other question too is, we don't have we don't have clear federal law on domestic terrorism. That's also been a big area of how do you define domestic terrorism versus terrorism per se. So this is saying, well, I'm designating them as a terrorist group, but I don't have a body of federal law which defines what a domestic terrorist group is, as opposed to an international terrorist group. He's already kind of gone out there and designated the cartels, the drug cartels, as terrorist groups, so they're narco terrorists. But this one, I have to tell you that it's making a statement for sure, and it probably will focus resources and investigative resources at looking at this stuff. And they do a lot of violence. They've done a lot of stuff over the many years, and they certainly rank as such as a violent extremist organization. But I'm sure the lawyers are going to look at this and say, okay, how do you implement something like this? Because there's a lot of questions on them as an organization per se, and also a lot of questions on, can you have a domestic, even a violent domestic political movement, can you designate them as a terrorist group under the law, and then how that would be done? So yeah, I got a lot of questions.
Let's expand on what Antifa is. There might be some viewers watching at home who don't track the news day to day quite like you and I do. Can you try and sum up what exactly the point of the group is?
Oh, absolutely. When you get into, first off, there's far left and far right groups. All right. And then there's groups like, ISIS and Al Qaeda, which are Islamic extremist organizations. There are sovereign citizens who are very violent, violent extremists, and they kind of reject federal government as a whole on a variety of reasons. They reject state government, things like that. And then you have Antifa, which is more on the far left cycle, anti-fascist. Some would say leaning more towards the socialist side, but they have been involved with a number of protests, anything they interpret as fascism. But they seem to focus on a lot of federal law enforcement. It seems to be one of the things that they really kind of look at a lot. And so they've been, you'll see protests out there, and you'll see Antifa signs pop up. And with that, you'll see vandalism and damage to property. Every once in a while, you will see attacks on individuals. To my knowledge, they haven't been doing anything along the line of some of the other terrorist groups. For example, if you recall, Oklahoma City, that was those two. That was one with members was a sovereign citizen, an anti-government extremist. Both of them were kind of anti-government extremists. They blew up the federal building back in 1995. Okay, that was more of a far right thing. Okay, now they would kind of fall in the same thing. They would also say, we don't have a clear organization. So it's not the first time that a terrorist per se, or somebody doing terrorism, has not had a strong organization that they can point to. that the government can go after. But this is more the far left side. They haven't been doing things along that line, but they have been doing a lot of property damage stuff, a lot of protests, very disruptive. And I think what this does is kind of linking what happened in Utah with Charlie Kirk to the far left, and by extension saying that that was Antifa. And it's an interesting connection. I haven't seen anything pop up in the evidence so far that, except for some of the stuff that he wrote on the ammunition, which was an anti-fascist slogan that could be interpreted as being anti-fascist, hence the term Antifa for anti-fascist. One could make a connection there, but I think that's pretty much where we are with this, presidential decision, if you will, to
Yeah.
designate them as such. And then again, the other question is, does Congress have to do something? Because when I go back to 5, 6, 7 years ago, there was congressional action to go after Antifa. And this is not the first time that President Trump has talked about designating Antifa as a terrorist organization. He talked about this back in 2020. And it appears that maybe whatever he did back then was undone on the Biden administration. So now he's having to go back and redo it. So yeah, it's this is one for the lawyers, and certainly trying to prosecute Antifa as a terrorist organization or terrorist group. That will be an interesting courtroom setting, because there's a lot of things that a judge would have to get clear on that.
Remind us, what has happened to other groups that the White House has deemed a terrorist organization in recent months?
The other groups were drug cartels, and with those groups, and keep in mind they're international or transnational, so they've been doing things such as with loads of drugs coming across the Caribbean. They have done direct strikes. They have done strike missions. Now, the question on Antifa would be, okay, if they're designated terrorists, could you do some sort of strike mission on them? And I think that would be a lot more difficult to justify, because A, it would be on U.S. soil, and as far as I know, most of the Antifa members are U.S. citizens, and I'm sure that the courts would take a dim view of avoiding any due process or anything like that, just because of the political protest sort of thing. So that would be one of those things. The other thing too is we've seen some stuff where people have protested and they have said stuff in support of Hamas. Hamas is a designated U.S. terrorist group. There have been some moves to link those protesting for Hamas against Israel as terrorists themselves. So far, that hasn't really worked out well, except for, of course, if they're not U.S. citizens. They have been, as we have seen, they've been accelerated into being deported back to wherever they're from, or somewhere overseas. So that has happened as well. But I mean, theoretically, you take it to the nth degree, you say they're terrorists, but you'd still have to show a clear and present danger in order to do some sort of direct action thing on these terrorists. They'd have to be engaged in something where you still have to follow the rules of force in terms of or the escalation of the use of force in terms of whatever's done.